By the late summer of 1942, German bomber activity over the UK was almost negligible, and Dennis and I were posted to the Middle East and to 272 Squadron at its home base, Idku, near Alexandria. It was here that new arrivals were trained for long-range daylight fighting before transfer to the main squadron at its forward base in Malta. We were introduced to the latest Beaufighter, the Mark VI, powered by Hercules engines, and soon found that the extra power transformed it from the bitchy cow into a friendly and exhilarating aircraft affectionately called the Beau by all who flew it. Dennis soon mastered the aircraft and became enthusiastic about it. I took a WT course, and we spent hours flying over the desert and the sea, practicing navigation with the minimum of visual and radio aids. The chief instructor at Idku was Squadron Leader G.M. Coleman, DFC, nicknamed Pop because he must have been one of the oldest operational pilots in the RAAF. He was a kind, shy, and gentle man, but one of the most skillful and knowledgeable pilots I have ever known. Aircrew who completed their operational tours in Malta will know that their survival was in no small part due to what Pop had taught them. Pop returned to operational duties with 272 Squadron in 1943, but was forced to ditch in the Mediterranean and unable to fly operationally again. By the end of 1942, Dennis and I were ready for operations in Malta, but shortages of aircraft there meant that, first of all, we had to go to West Africa to pick up a new Beau. At that time, the only feasible way to supply Beaus to Egypt or Malta was for them to be crated by sea to Takoradi, where they were assembled and flown across Africa. Thus, on 1 January 1943, Dennis and I, together with about 6 other crews, were flown by Liberator to what is now Ghana. We arrived at Takoradi on the 5th, carried out an air test on our new Beau the next day, and left that afternoon, finally arriving back at Idku on the 10th. I shall never forget that flight, east from Takoradi along the Slave Coast to Lagos, and then north over the tropical forests of the Niger Delta to the grasslands of northern Nigeria. As we flew east, the grasslands became sparser and were replaced by the desert of Sudan. We refueled at Maiduguri and El Fasher, surely the hottest place on earth. Then ever eastwards with the desert below us, which was devoid of landmarks or life of any sort. We became mesmerized by the featureless horizon. We were hot and fighting sleep and were exasperated by mirages that appeared and disappeared. Then, in the distance, we saw vegetation, which turned out not to be another mirage, but the Nile Valley. I was overwhelmed by 2 emotions. First, the relief that my navigation had been okay, and secondly, to experience what was, for me, the most beautiful view I had ever seen before or since. The Nile Valley, like a lush green ribbon, stretching northwards through the desert as far as the eye could see from the confluence of the blue and white Niles at Khartoum. After that, it was easy to follow the Nile northwards, stay at Luxor, then on down to Idku with 40 hours flying in our logbooks and 10,000 miles behind us. A few days' rest and we were off to Malta. Number 272 Squadron, like its sister squadron, Number 252, was based at Takali, a grass airfield near Rabat in the center of the island. We were introduced to the CO, Wing Commander J.M. Buck Buchanan, DSO, DFC, and BAR. Buck had been a Wellington pilot operating over Europe during the first year of the war when he was awarded the DFC. He then saw action in Eritrea before moving to Egypt in 1941. He flew Blenheim 4 bombers in the early desert campaigns, and by 1942 had completed over 200 operations and been awarded a BAR to his DFC. He took command of 272 Squadron in Malta in November 1942, flying fighters for the first time. Buck's exploits in the Middle East were legendary and were talked about over and over again during our period in Egypt. We heard how he had shot down about 10 enemy aircraft during his first 6 weeks with 272 Squadron and awarded a DSO, how he appeared indestructible even when attacking destroyers with cannon fire, how he escaped from an operation over the western desert with half a squadron of Italian fighters on his tail, and how a blonde female correspondent from an American news magazine had stood behind him in the